The Galactic Resource Council had existed for 12,000 years before humanity ever looked up at the stars and wondered what lived among them. The council controlled everything: mining rights, water claims, energy extraction permits, and the distribution of rare minerals across 700 inhabited worlds, all passed through their ancient bureaucratic systems. Species waited centuries for approval. Wars had been fought over a single asteroid field. The council moved slowly because it had always moved slowly, and no one questioned this truth. Then the humans arrived. Ambassador stood before the council chambers on Station Prime for the first time in 2287. She was 43 years old, born in a small fishing village on Earth's coast, and she had spent 20 years working in nonprofit organizations before the United Earth government recruited her for first contact protocols. The alien delegates looked at her credentials and felt confused. She had no military background. She held no degrees in resource management or interstellar law. Her expertise was listed simply as community development and donor relations. The delegate, a being of crystalline structure who had served on the council for 800 years, reviewed her file 3 times. He could not understand why Earth had sent this person. Other new species sent their strongest warriors, their most brilliant scientists, or their wealthiest merchants. Earth sent a woman who had once organized a charity auction to build schools in remote regions of her. Smiled at the assembled delegates. She did not demand anything. She did not threaten. She simply asked if she could learn about their worlds, their cultures, their needs. The council members exchanged glances of uncertainty. No species had ever asked such questions during first contact. Over the following months, traveled to 17 different worlds. She visited the methane oceans of 7 and learned that the aquatic had been trying to secure funding for underwater research stations for 3 centuries. She walked the silicon deserts of Threshold and discovered that the machine beings there needed rare isotopes to repair their oldest citizens, isotopes that the council had classified as low priority. She breathed filtered air on the dying world of Pale Garden and listened to the plant-based speak of restoration projects that had been funding for so long that entire generations had given up hope. Took notes. She asked follow-up questions. She remembered names and faces and stories. When she returned to Station Prime, she did something no ambassador had ever done before. She organized a dinner party. The council delegates received invitations written by hand on paper made from earth trees. The invitations smelled like forests and rain. Several species had never encountered the concept of a personal invitation before. Their cultures operated entirely through official channels and formal requests. This small card with elegant handwriting confused them deeply, but it also intrigued them. 47 delegates attended the dinner, had researched every single one. She served dishes that honored their various biochemistries. She arranged seating so that species who had never spoken to each other found themselves in conversation. She introduced the ambassador to a botanist who had studied aquatic plants for decades. She connected the machine beings of Threshold to an engineer who had developed isotope refinement techniques centuries ago, but had never found practical applications for his work. By the end of the evening, 3 informal partnerships had formed. The engineer agreed to share his research with Threshold. The botanist began planning a consultation visit to 7. A trading company from the Outer Rim discovered that Earth's entertainment media had massive potential value in sectors that had never heard human music or seen human films. Watched these connections form and felt the familiar warmth of her old work returning. This was what she had always done. She found people with needs and connected them to people with resources. She built bridges made of trust and mutual benefit. The scale had changed dramatically, but the fundamental principle remained the same. The Galactic Resource Council noticed these developments with growing interest. Ambassador had been on Station Prime for less than 1 standard year, and already she had facilitated more interspecies cooperation than the Council had achieved in the previous century. The ancient bureaucratic systems had no category for what she was doing. She was not negotiating treaties or claiming territories. She was simply helping people help each other. Earth's second ambassador arrived 6 months later. His name was, and he had spent 30 years working in microfinance and community banking. He brought with him a proposal that made the council's economic advisors stare at their screens in disbelief. Suggested creating a shared funding pool. Species with excess resources could contribute to this pool, and species with urgent needs could apply for grants. The contributions would be voluntary. The applications would be reviewed by rotating committees drawn from all participating worlds. There would be no interest charged, no territorial demands attached, no political strings. The pool would exist simply to do good. The delegate asked what Earth expected in return, smiled the same gentle smile that often wore, and explained that Earth expected nothing specific. Humans had learned long ago that generosity created its own rewards. When you helped others succeed, they remembered. When you invested in communities, those communities grew stronger and eventually had more to share. The rising tide lifted all vessels. This philosophy baffled the Council. The galactic economy had operated on strict exchange principles for every transaction balanced precisely, every favor demanded repayment. The idea of giving without immediate expectation of return seemed foolish, even dangerous. Surely other species would exploit such naivety. But and had done their research well. They knew which species valued honor above all else and would never abuse trust. They knew which worlds had proud traditions of reciprocity that simply needed someone to make the first gesture. They identified potential partners with care and patience, building each relationship on solid foundations of genuine understanding. The first contribution to the Galactic Cooperation Fund came from their world was dying, but they still possessed vast seed libraries containing genetic material from plants that had gone extinct across dozens of worlds. They donated access to these libraries freely, asking only that recipients share any successful cultivation results with the broader community. The contributed next. Their underwater engineering techniques had applications far beyond their methane oceans. They offered training programs and technical consultations to any world that requested them. Within months, 3 agricultural planets had redesigned their irrigation systems using methods, increasing crop yields by 40%. The fund grew. More species contributed. More worlds received help. Organized regular gatherings where recipients could thank donors in person, where success stories could be shared, where new partnerships could form organically through conversation and genuine connection. She called these events appreciation dinners, borrowing terminology from her nonprofit days on Earth. The Council observed all of this with increasing wonder. Human diplomats were achieving results that had seemed impossible. They were not doing this through military strength or economic pressure or technological superiority. Humanity possessed none of these advantages in galactic terms. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were primitive. Their economy was tiny. But humans possessed something the galaxy had forgotten existed. They possessed the ability to see strangers as potential friends rather than potential threats. They assumed good faith until proven otherwise. They invested time in understanding others without demanding anything in return. They remembered names and stories and small personal details that made individuals feel valued and seen. A philosopher wrote a treatise attempting to explain the human phenomenon. He called their approach relationship infrastructure. Just as physical infrastructure like roads and power grids enabled economic development, relationship infrastructure enabled cooperation and mutual support. Humans were not acquiring resources directly. They were building the connections through which resources could flow freely between willing partners. The treatise became widely read. Other species began experimenting with human methods. Some failed because they attempted to fake genuine interest for manipulative purposes. The approach only worked when the care was real. But many species discovered that they actually enjoyed learning about others, that building friendships across vast cultural differences brought satisfaction they had never expected. 20 years after first stood before the Council, humanity's position in galactic society had transformed completely. Earth remained a small and relatively poor world by galactic standards. Human technology still lagged behind the elder races. Human military power remained negligible. But humanity had become the most connected species in known space. Human ambassadors served as trusted intermediaries in disputes between ancient rivals. Human organized events drew attendees from every sector. Human charity networks distributed aid faster and more efficiently than the Council's official systems. Human cultural exports generated genuine affection across hundreds of worlds that had never seen a human face in person. The Galactic Resource Council eventually created a new position, Director of Community Development. They offered this position too. She accepted on one condition. The position would rotate between species every decade, ensuring that the relationship-building approach would spread throughout the galaxy rather than remaining a human specialty. Understood something fundamental that had taken the galaxy 12,000 years to recognize. Resources alone meant nothing. Technology alone built nothing lasting. Military power alone created only fear and resentment. The true foundation of any civilization, whether planetary or galactic, was the web of relationships that connected its members. Trust was the most valuable currency in existence. Kindness was the most powerful force available to any species. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. Humanity had befriended it. And in doing so, they had achieved something far greater than any empire could ever accomplish through force. They had created a community that actually wanted to help its members succeed. The delegate who had once stared at its credentials in confusion lived long enough to see the transformation she had begun. In his final report to the Council before retiring after 1,200 years of service, he wrote a single sentence that would be quoted for centuries afterward. The humans taught us that the best way to acquire resources is to help others acquire theirs first. Read that sentence at his memorial service. She smiled the same gentle smile she had worn on her first day in the council chambers. Then she returned to work, organizing the next appreciation dinner, making the next introduction, building the next bridge between strangers who had not yet discovered they could become friends. The galaxy continued to change. Wars became less frequent. Trade became more equitable. Species that had isolated themselves began reaching out, curious about this new approach to existence that the humans had introduced. The Galactic Cooperation Fund grew until it managed more resources than most planetary governments. And somewhere on Earth, in a small fishing village on the coast, a young girl learned that her planet had once been considered primitive and insignificant by galactic standards. She learned that her people had changed everything not through weapons or wealth, but through simple kindness and genuine care. She decided that she wanted to become an ambassador when she grew up. The story continued. The relationships deepened, the resources flowed, and humanity kept doing what humanity had always done best. They made friends. They built communities. They cared about strangers they had never met. In the vast cold emptiness of space, they created warmth wherever they went.